Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm using the Fly With Me stamp set from Mama Elephant. This came out a while ago and I've been meaning to use it, and today is the day. I'm going to use some Fabriano Artistico Hot Press extra white watercolor paper today. This has a great texture to it. It's pretty smooth, but it also has just almost like a really faint, almost a linen texture. It's a really, really nice paper, and I especially like that it's very bright white. I stamped one of the elephant images in Distress ink. This is the color Antique Linen. I'm going to be doing some no-line coloring today, and this very light yellow shade kind of blends into the coloring, and it makes it look like the lines aren't even there, hence the name no-line coloring. I'm going to start by painting the background, so I'm going to protect the image itself by first applying a layer of drying gum. Drying gum is a liquid masking fluid, and you just put it over the areas that you want to protect, and then when you go to paint over the top, everything underneath is still bright white. So the thing you have to remember when you're using liquid masking fluid is you have to make sure to let everything dry. So I let that dry thoroughly before coming in with some water. I'm putting on a little bit of water. I want the kind of background sky to be very, very soft. So I'm going to use a tumbled glass color. This is a Distress ink shade, and I've just pressed the ink pad onto a slick surface so I can pick it up. I'm also using the color Shaded Lilac for the sky area. Dropping in some color, and because the paper is wet, it really softens the edge of all of that color. I ended up bringing in a little bit of Stormy Sky as well, just to darken up that area. I'm planning to have the grading off to the right of the elephant, and so I needed a little bit more color right there so that when I stamp and emboss in white, it has a little bit of color behind the white word so it's easier to read. So I dried that with my heat tool until everything was completely dry. You have to make sure everything is absolutely bone dry. And then you can come in with an adhesive eraser, and this is from Xyron, and you can just very gently peel away that drying gum. So I'm starting out with Scattered Straw and Abandoned Coral, and I'm going to be painting the balloon. So when it comes to no line coloring, the thing you have to remember is because there aren't going to be black lines or dark lines differentiating between different shapes, you have to make sure that your shading almost acts like a line. So you want to have the most dark and intense colors right where the line is. That helps me. So I'm going to bring in some Rusty Hinge just to darken up this bottom line, and I'll come back later and intensify even more. For the elephant, I'm starting out with Milled Lavender, giving it a nice pale purple shade. I am going to mostly make this elephant gray, but I wanted to give it just a little tiny hint of color before I get to all of the shading. I didn't want it to look just completely gray. I think this gives it a little bit more life, a little bit more vibrancy, even though in the end you really can't see much of the purple. So I'm going to bring in Pumice Stone, which is a nice light gray, and I'm going to be adding this to the darkest areas. I'm almost going to be adding this to the lines, almost like I'm drawing the lines with this shade, and that's because I want these areas to be very clearly defined. So I bring in a little bit of that darker shade, and then I add some water to my paintbrush, kind of pinch it off so it's not too wet, and then soften that line. And that gives me a really nice effect. For this particular elephant, I didn't want him to read super, super gray. I wanted him to almost look like he's a very, very pale gray, almost a white elephant. I think that's really kind of cuddly and cute, and I thought it would look great with this colorful balloon. So I thought that was the line of the arm, and then realized that's actually the string from the balloon. So I then extended the shading down the side of his the right side of the body, and then took the shading to other areas. I'm adding more and more of this pumice stone shade, just trying to intensify the shading. When you're doing no line coloring, the only way you're going to be able to kind of pinpoint where the shapes start and begin is by making sure that you have a dark lined area. Like I said before, you're almost letting your shading become the lines. You want to make sure you have really good differences between the lights and dark areas so that everything doesn't read like a big blob. You want it to have really defined shapes so that people know what you're painting. So I'm adding just more shading right around the ears and on the arms. I want to make sure that this has a really dark area. Continuing to add more shading. I'm doing this kind of in layers. I don't stay in one area too long. I'll do one little area, then move to another, and doing it this way allows each area to dry before I add more color on top. So I'm adding more Rusty Hinge up here, just intensifying that color, and I'll use a little bit of clean water to soften that edge. Now I'm bringing in some worn lipstick onto the cheeks of the elephant just to give him a little rosy blush. So I put a little bit of color and then soften that with a wet brush. I'm going to add even more shading with Hickory Smoke. I'm going to use this for the line of the string on the balloon, and I'm also going to use it to outline the elephant's eyes and just intensify a little bit of the shading along the right side of his body. And that's really going to help everything take shape. I'm adding a little more shading right under his legs and right along the side of his body. So the painting's almost completely done, just had to finish those few little shading bits, and then I hit it with my heat tool to make sure everything was completely dry. I then removed it from the board, and I'm going to do the final bit of stamping, which is just the greeting that says big hugs. So I'm placing it in my MISTI tool so I can stamp once again, and I'm going to prep this with an anti-static powder tool. I'm stamping the greeting in Versamark ink, and then I'll use some white embossing powder from Burgess Monroe over the top. And because I used Versamark ink, it's really sticky. It's going to attract all of that white powder, and I'm going to get a really good impression. So I'm heat setting that with my heat tool. And this is almost done. I just have to put it on a card base now. So the card base is scored at 5.5 to create a top folding card. And I'm using some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I used some Tombow Extreme adhesive to adhere this watercolor panel onto the front of my card, and then it's complete. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I love illustrations like this. They remind me of children's books, and you can check out the stamp set. It's linked down below in the video description or at my blog. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.